And thanks, Minister, for coming in. Going through the estimates, food and safety, animal plant is down 4%. Why is that?
Which line are you on there, Deputy Fitzmaurice?
I had it at the beginning there. It's one of the beginning.
Page 5. Food
Table
safety, animal
3,
plant health.
page 5.
So savings have been identified in a number of areas here within A3 and which were transferred to A4 TB eradication during the year. So there were some savings identified in this over the course of the year and then transferred into the TB eradication program.
How is that, like, when you do, that's what I'm trying to, when you talk about animal and plant health?
Do we have any more detail on that particular point? The 4 million savings on the... So there was savings, for example, in the TASA and the anti-parasitic program as well, and also in some disease monitoring costs as well.
Okay.
So it amounted to what, 3.7 million or so.
The TB budget, and I know it's like there has been a fair explosion in TB this year. Are you concerned that a bigger budget will have to go in? Because my understanding at the moment in talking to farmers, especially in the dairy sector, that DBI, the value of a cow has been cut 50 to 60 euro on the EBI assessments over the last month. Is that a cut by the department, or because money is, obviously more money is being put in, is this going to set a trend if more cattle get TB that they're going to start tightening on the price of the stock? Because I've talked to a few dairy farmers that unfortunately cows would have gone earlier in the year, and the same cow with the same ABI has got less. They're saying between, I think it's 60 and 100 euro they're talking. Is that the case?
So are you talking about whenever an animal is sold as a breeding animal, or an animal
TB.
When an animal is slaughtered, in terms of what the price they're getting are, and the fact that the payment under the compensation scheme is reducing in terms of the
reduced in the line of there's a different assessments you look at dairy cow obviously, but the EBI has changed that chart. Is that correct?
Well, I know over the course of the last year, for example, the payments the payments in terms of compensation per animal on average would be up by about 20% from the scheme. So partly because I think it was in relation to, I think, the carcass weight. So the fact, actually, it was primarily related to the fact that there was more dairy animals going through the TB program, and as a result of that, carcass weights would have been less than maybe what the balance would have been previous to that. So the amount of funding that was being made up then had increased as a result of that.
We're just hearing at the moment, you might check it out with farmers, that the EBI, if you had similar EBI a few months ago, that it has now changed, and the farmers are concerned about that. Are you concerned?
So when you say EBI, I mean, so obviously that's economic benefit index in terms of the economic. So and that's an assessment of the productivity of a cow. Okay, which is separate to what is carcass weight or is. Yeah. Okay.
But it all feeds into the one.
Okay.
Algorithm.
Okay, and I mean that would be an assessment that would be monitored and carried out through the ICBF in terms of monitoring data and information that comes in. So That hadn't been raised with me. I'm not aware of that being a case. I'd certainly, let's certainly look into it further, like, yeah.
Can you tell me, on the carbon tax, I see there's 3 million or something, 3.5 million. How much does the Department of Agriculture get in total budget of the carbon tax?
Do you have a note down there? Yeah, but do we have a figure for how much in total goes in from the carbon taxes coming to the
How much do you get from finance, the Department of Finance?
I'm not sure we have a note. We don't have a figure on that here, Deputy Fitzmaurice.
And can we get a figure?
We can, yeah. We do have it. I would have had it.
The total figure that the Department of Agriculture gets from Finance, Department of Finance, for the carbon tax. Right, thanks. In the line of forestry, I see there's no change in that. How can you gauge forestry when we're sowing probably a fifth, if you look at the budget for it, when it's a fifth of what our target is? Should it not be, say, a fifth less of the money used? Huh?
Yeah, well,
our target is 8,000 hectares.
Yeah. So in terms of new planting, yes, like a big percentage of what goes out in forestry is the annual premiums, and obviously they last for 15 years or 20 years now. So that part is predictable because those trees are there for that length of time. The part that you don't have the same predictability on, obviously, is the planting. The plantings in particular, you have a lot more predictability over fellings, though there isn't the same cost associated with that. So. Listen, we have over budgeted the last 2, 3, 4 years because we've been budgeting on the basis of meeting the target, but we haven't been meeting the target. And as you know, like the scheme we've brought in, the new forestry scheme is very attractive, and a big improvement in what the previous scheme would have been, with premiums up to 60% increase, and also the number of years a farmer can get the premiums for now has gone from 15 years to 20 years. But despite that, we're still not seeing a significant uptake in relation to the number of plantings. Now, confidence was definitely impacted by the licensing backlog that we had to deal with. Was there whenever we came into office, and we had to work our way through. Thankfully, that's largely ratified now, with much more regular timeframes in place in terms of the length of time it takes to get a licence. But I've no doubt it impacted morale across the sector too. But, and I think the other thing, Deputy Fitzmaurice, and you know this too, is just the general health of alternative options in terms of land use as well, whether it be leasing land or whether it be, dairying, or indeed, the price just of generally renting. I think that's impacting as well on farmers deciding whether they go in and take a longer term, 15, 20 year or longer, change of land use. So, listen, so we've adjusted in the most recent budget. I think we adjusted somewhat the forestry figures to take a more balanced approach to what we thought the likely uptake might be next year. Obviously, we still hope and would like to reach the 8,000, but certainly on previous uptake, it would be a massive jump to get to that in a year.
You won't think you'd hardly even reach last year, but anyhow, might too. Food aid, I remember a few years ago you coming in and there was a plan done out for like 3 years what we were going to give, and we had actually paid a lot ahead of our time. I see a new figure for food aid in. Why is that?
So we're starting now this coming year, the first year of our new 3-year agreement, and I've increased the commitment to the World Food Programme by 40% from what would have been there before. So previously it was 30 million a year, and it's now previous 25 million, and now it's now 35. So 35 million a year committed, and obviously the same. Like myself and the rest of us, the good impact that has in very, very food vulnerable areas, which I would have seen myself. on the most recent St Patrick's Day expeditions to different parts of the world. I would have chosen to go to South Sudan and Ethiopia and Kenya specifically, with the specific objective of actually witnessing and engaging with the World Food Programme there in terms of the work that's on to actually to see that. And as part of that, I would have announced our commitment as well to increasing by 40%. So it's now 35 million. We have, over the last number of years, often paid, if we could, paid in advance the World Food Programme funding, and that they are always willing to receive it early, and also it can also form part of the budgetary discussions and engagements I would have, whereby if I can find a way to pay it by the end of the year for the following year, it frees up more financial capacity to do the types of things then I'd like to do in terms of the budget as well, in terms of supporting farmers. So we're forward paying some this year as well. It's the amount we're forward paying is 18 million out of the 35. So last year we'd have paid the full 25 early, and this year we're paying the 18 million early. So it'll still leave 17 for next year.
Organic is down 66%. What's the reason?
So organic payments in 2024 were paid from B3, and then savings in B15 were recycled within the vote. So B3, agri-environmental schemes. So it would have been organic payments this year were paid from that, and then savings in B15 would have been recycled within the vote.
Why is that it would be paid out organic or environmental?
Because we were utilising the remainder of the URI funding, which is a specific stream of funding, and it was 100% refundable. And organics was one of the few, because the organic scheme is a continuation and from the previous rural development programme, as opposed to a new CAP scheme. It was one of the few schemes which actually were eligible for drawing down URI funding. So we redirected that in order to draw down that URI funding to make sure we'd fully utilised that allocation from Europe.
Right. In relation to, and Deputy Kinney spoke about it, the acres and the acres budget, and I know, farmers got in. I'm not saying they didn't, and that's welcome. But what is the cause that, in fairness to Portlaoise, they handle the BPS or Chris and BIS and ANC and the whole shebang, sheep welfare, how come that they're able to get all payments out perfect, and that in Wexford then you have Forestry and acres, and it seems to be the greatest nightmare that ever was? How come that is? Because this seems to be followed, since I came into the Dáil, this seems to be a trend.
Well, listen, forestry, first of all, Deputy Fitzmaurice. So, I mean, the big challenge around forestry was a court decision in 2019. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. So, that radically changed the assessment process overnight for forestry licensing, and meant that a very significant increase in human resources required to be able to consider a license, and led to the development of a very significant backlog, which took time then until recently, until the last year, to be able to actually rectify. Acres, unfortunately, it has proven to be really, it's much more complex than many of the other schemes, and it required a new IT system to be built, and all of the complexities that go with that. And I'm certainly no expert in all of the ins and outs of behind the screen in terms of all of the networks and technology that's involved in that. But it also does then speak, the acres does speak to many different parts of other activities that farmers carrying out. So, for example, your BIS payment and that sort of thing is interrelated as well. Any change with a parcel also can have impact in relation to your acres, and then you have the scoring system. So administratively, it was very challenging, Deputy Fitzmaurice, and has continued to be over the into this year. But thankfully, I think there's getting into a situation whereby it can operate as we'd expect going into next year.
Yeah, but what I can't understand in this, Minister, is that the likes say if the satellite shows something from the sky for the BIS, rapid field inspection is done, and done rapid, in fairness to them. We hadn't even up to a month ago a system where they were able to feed in the information into the acre side if it was an acres inspection. Like, that's a year and a half down the road now. That's not tolerable, to be quite frank about it. And there's a lot of the CP zones on the lowland, in fairness, they got through the barriers. But on the CP zones, like, you need to basically do something immediate. Like, you talked about farmers getting the money, and yeah, they did. But then they got they had to pay money back. And then there was information that planners needed scorecards and stuff to send them in, and then they weren't able to get the information out. Like, there's been a pure nightmare for the planners and the farmers. And like, in all fairness, I don't care who you are, or whether it's 5% or 1%. If someone went in good faith and paid a planner in 2023, it's wrong that today, and all them payments at the moment are suspended. Am I correct in that? Every payment for 2023, because they're trying to get out 2024 now, in fairness, they're stalled until January. So, like, it's not very fair on any farmer to be treated that way. And I think that regardless of what you needed to do, we should pay them. Whether, like, I remember France were in trouble in 2015, and it's there for anyone to read. And they were able to get money from their exchequer to pay it out to the farmers, and then when they got all their IT problems sorted, they were able to put it back in. And we have, like, them 5% of farmers could have their tongues out for money this minute, and they have, because they're ringing us, every one of us, and no one seems to be doing anything for them, and they're getting awful frustrated. And then the other part is, then they could get 2 bubbles in the 1 year, and then they're trying to deal with that. So I'm just wondering, Minister, like, is your department looking at some simple way? And I think the hill farmers, I think, in fairness, is singy in some proposal. Is any of the likes of that being considered to try and get these people sorted? Because I don't care who they are, they don't deserve to be waiting the length or waiting after the paying out people to get their plan in place.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, what you're describing there in relation to what happened in France is pretty much what I've done here.
France paid it all, though, now, in fairness.
Yeah, well, you see, we've paid more than it all in some instances.
That's debatable, because the second part didn't come.
That's the challenge, you see, with an interim payment, because it's a blunt instrument in terms of some farmers mightn't have been expected, like farmers, for example, with a small land holding may not have been in line for a big score, yet they got the same interim payment, the standard.
Yeah, but Minister, with due respect, even if you paid more, if you give €1,000 more to a farmer, it's a 5-year plan. There's no point whipping it off their bits or their crisps or whatever they're getting. Why couldn't we have said, well, look, if we give them more, there's no point sending them out in a letter the following week and saying, I want this back or I want that back. Like, it's like waiting in the grass for someone. You're going to pay them for 5 years, so it's pretty simple. If they were willing to wait a year or a year and a half for money, surely to God, you could say, well, next year we can straighten this out and we can balance it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we've said that as well, though. So that's the structure put in place. So listen, I mean, the default is that if there's an overpayment on a farmer's account from one scheme, it's taken off another. But the structure I put in place then was for any farmers that did have an overpayment, that they could ask for it to be attached to their acres, entirely to their acres. So therefore, it'll come out of their next acres payment, or if it doesn't, or the one after that. So it's ring fenced. So where a farmer's requested that, it's ring fenced to their acres payments.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Chair.